second hour talking. Dude? I switch directly in English.
Oh,
so
we have the same,
you see, it's like...
It's you, huh?
So, we have been intense days with two intense women coming from an intense area and making intense art. So, I'm really glad to have today Yael here after we saw Emily's work. I'm not going to mention the biography because everything is printed and you can see it in the paper. But we have been showing together in different exhibitions. We were also somehow competing for an award, and surely she won. We were like shortlisted together. So I'm very happy.
It's not so sure.
Okay, but
I think you should have.
So, yeah, the same. I'm very curious because yesterday was very, very good. I know your work. I knew your work, but to be yesterday also here and to see, to listen to you and to see your work, the way you narrated was kind of something new, and the same I'm sure it will be tonight. So thank you again for coming. And
thank you, because I have to say that ever since I heard about your amazing place, I said immediately, invite me, I want to be here. So thank you for making this happen. And also the coincide with Emily, it's actually really also super exciting for me and I hope for Emily. So thanks for coming. I've been thinking what should I do in this context, which is so intimate and so wonderful to, you know, I like this. I like smaller groups. I like to, and basically I just want to share. For me, it's like the sharing is the process of basically sharing the process of how I work, why I actually work, and why I decided to dedicate my life to being an artist. Because it wasn't never really obvious and never was really my dream. Actually, I was a very successful basketball player for many years. I could have a career probably as a coach by now because I'm too old to play. But yeah, I was in the national team, so I was actually really more into sport than art. But also photography was very close to my heart because of my father, who was an obsessive photographer, just like this man. So I think I kind of inherited his love to photography, and we traveled a lot and photographed. And yeah, so I was exposed to photography through him from very, very early stage. I mean, like I was already 12, staging commercials. And then, yeah, so I enrolled into photography department by actually thinking I would be a great National Geographic photographer, because that was my dream, like a sort of anthropology. And in 1992, 96, I studied in Jerusalem in the photography department, but right after finishing school, actually, I left Israel because I couldn't live there for political reason and for personal. I mean, there were a mixture of reasons why I really just packed my stuff very quickly, and I said I can't live here. And so ever since like '96, I don't live in Israel. I was living in different countries. There was a very short period of going back to be closer to my family, but lasted like 2 years. But I mostly don't live there. And I think I say that because it's very much linked to the way I work, and very much my decision of making my work is very much linked to my biography, and really trying to question and deconstruct, or maybe trying to understand this kind of fiction of gender, of nation, of race, like to try to find my way to relate and yes, try to understand this fiction. And so reality and fiction became a very my way of working in recent years. And like when I was like 30, I moved to Amsterdam to do the Rijksacademy program, and I decided that after 4 years not making art to actually become an artist, because I really wanted to sort of understand the place I grew up in, and to be more critical, the more like open, slowly. My works became more and more political, and more. I was also involved in resisting the occupation in Israel, and like Israeli occupation and occupation in Palestine. But yeah, it was like very much linked to my development as growing up and understanding and becoming more and more political, and so my work. Can I? So actually, I'm going to start with where I grew up. So I was like born in a small, very tiny village in the north of Israel in 1970. It's agriculture. My father was a veterinarian, so he worked there, and so that's why we ended up there. And so I think I found this picture on the internet. So because my family don't live there for many years, and I left when I was 18, and I never lived there ever since. And I found it quite interesting that the flag of Israel, the Israeli flag is there. We never had. Maybe we had it in some celebrations, I guess. An overgrown garden, our garden would look much better. But it was interesting just to find this picture. You see Google, it's a proof that it's Google Images. Because what is for me is important is like my home is very close to the memorial monuments for soldiers who were killed since the establishment of Israel, and Bet Am, which is like the place for the people's home, or not? So it's like a folks house, like the people's. It's like a place for celebration of this small community of 80 families. And so it's very much, I think, connect to the kind of work I do ever since, dealing with the politics of memory and actually the communities, and the sense of the need of finding my own community, so to say. Yeah, this is it. It's like zooming out. This is and I will talk later, but it's like a very. I think this was one of the reasons I feel like I always, like growing up, I felt like I grew up in a sort of a bubble that was full of lies. So I was like disconnected from another whole reality that. The kind of narrative that I grew up with is very Zionist narrative, and growing out of this and understanding that there's a whole other reality that was hidden from me because of the very strong system. Really kind of formed my way of looking at my homeland. So yeah. So this is a very quick. Introduction to my biography, but it really, as I said, it's really formed my way of thinking, and my resistance to the upbringing, and asking a lot of questions and trying to find my own voice. I wanted to start with a film from 2006. It was so.
You connect the sound?
Oh yeah, that would be good. Is it connected or?
Yes.
Um, I'm jumping. So I actually start from 2000. I started to make films in trying to understand national identity, and so if I call myself the amateur anthropologist, looking at rituals and the military and national and the nation way of forming and constructing an identity. But I wanted to start with an excerpt from a short film called The Declaration, and it's somehow very much linked to my interest in propaganda films and how those films were very influential. So they were called education films, but of course they're propaganda, and how they shape people's mind. It's a language of cinematic language that does not exist. You can see maybe reference. I mean, in commercial, you can maybe see still a kind of cinematic language that is still used in commercials. So declaration it's like one of the first things that I react to reality, and I try to change reality. So so to say, through a video. Oh, sorry, it's not a... I should also close. Yeah. So, why propaganda film, and why actually those images? I think my interest was kind of trying to find, as a citizen of Israel, to find a way to go against this propaganda of Zionism, because that Zionism brought us into very doomed, to my feeling, a very doomed situation. So those images from the Zionism of the new Jew, so to say, the kind of pioneers and the new Jews to come and to establish a Jewish state in Palestine, were very strongly propagated in European, in all over Europe. And so I wanted to kind of in a subversive way to work with the same images, but actually to offer maybe a new beginning. It's not so much. I mean, of course, the olive tree has many different symbolism, meaning, and so I was basically trying to say, okay, we have to remove the Israeli flag from, and just to say the Israeli flag is constantly there, is on the rock and it's in the shore, just against Jaffa, and so it was very disturbing to see it and my reaction was like, I have to move it, I have to remove it, I need to do something about this Israeli flag and suggest something that is maybe called for change. And it's, so it was my way to start maybe this kind of dialogue in a more active way, so in the public space as well. This interest and my need for making it different, at least through art, because I believe art can make a slight change and can be, as Galita I would say, responsibility. She uses the word responsibility, the ability to actually respond. And if we cannot, so at least we can be active participants as artists and change our reality, and at least create a sort of a platform for discussions. So this interest really grew, and so I was thinking after this work, what's next? I mean, what should I do next in order to propose a sort of change? And that led me to a number of another film that I shot in together with Israeli. Ihad is Israeli community against house demolition. So I joined their activities for 2 weeks in Anata in East Jerusalem. I'm not going to show this work because I would like to actually go to the trilogy that, the Polish trilogy requires a lot of explanation and how I created this piece. So I'm going to jump into this from 2006 to 2000, from Israel to Poland, because that was actually followed an invitation to come to Poland and make a new piece. And I decided that I need to change the slides. It was an invitation by the Foxal Gallery to come and make a new piece in Poland, and for every Jew and for every Israeli Jew, Poland is like the worst place on earth. And so, but also my family comes from Poland. Part of the family grandparents were killed in Poland in 1940 by the Germans during the occupation. I had growing up, I had zero contact to Poland. I mean, my grandparents, they hated the Polish people. They didn't want to, and there were all constant fights with the Polish neighbor. So also Zionism, the State of Israel, made us very strongly disconnect from our history. Learning Hebrew, of course, was part of the mechanism. And so I had, and so also Poland is used as part of the systematic politics of memory. Actually, State of Israel sending young kids to go to the concentration camp, visit the monuments in the concentration camp, have zero contact with Polish youth or anyone from Polish. Make sure they come back and strong and ready to become soldiers. So it's a very kind of very state propaganda, using the victims to become soldiers and occupy, continue the occupation. So I felt like if I go there, I have to go with I must go differently. I should not. First of all, I did not want to go to concentration camp, but also I really wanted to have contact with Polish people, and that was, and travel as much as I can in the country, and sort of what I call it really is a tabula rasa, white page. I just go and I want to experience and see what happens. So, being there, confronting different cities that actually a very strong, very big Jewish community. So living there, I started to imagine what will happen if the Jewish community now will, come back again and live here together, and revive the history and revive the community. But also what it means for Israel. So what does it mean? So that's how I started to, and then. So I very quickly came up with this slogan: 3.3 million Jews can change the life of 40 million Poles. And 3.3 million Jews is a number of the Jewish community until the Second World War. So there was a very massive community that was completely annihilated. It was like there are a few thousand living there right now. And the slogans actually came together with Slavomir Sharkovsky, who is an activist. I met him in Warsaw. He was 26 here. He's a young he was back then young activist. He himself has a movement called the Kritika Polityczna. It's trying to create a new left in Poland. So it was really important for me if I may work on such project and try to sort of trigger or disturb the status quo between Israel and Poland, and I wanted to find a collaborator for that, or as we always joke, like a comrade in that. So and Slavomir Sharkovsky became a very good collaborators, because somehow I always feel like him and his friends and his community were waiting for this one Jew to come to the country and try to revive the Jewish community. So it's always like it felt very, very strange to be this one Jew, because also my relationship, what it means to be a Jewish, I don't know. I became Jew only when I left Israel, so it was interesting identity question again. So this project, this is Slavomir, and is one of his talks. He's a public figure in Poland. Everybody knows him. And I, with Fakis also trying to create new democracy in Europe. Yes, with him it was quite quick. It was very clear that I have to, that he should become the protagonist of my project. So before I continue talking about it, maybe for the one who are not familiar with the work, I would like to show a clip.
Żydzi, rodacy, ludzie, ludzie! Myślicie, że ta stara kobieta, która wciąż śpi pod pierzyną rybki, nie chce was widzieć? Zapomniała o was? Mylicie się. Ona śni o was każdej nocy. Śni i drży ze strachu. Od tej nocy, kiedy was już nie było, a jej matka sięgnęła po waszą pierzynę, nawiedzają ją mary. Mary, koszmary. Tylko wy możecie je przejąć. Niech przy jej łóżku stanie 3 miliony Żydów, których zabrakło w Polsce. I przegoni w końcu te smory. Wracajcie do Polski. Do waszego, naszego kraju. Stańcie przy jej łóżku i połóżcie swoje dłonie na tej starej pierzynie. Cienkiej, jak prześcieradło, z której puch dawno już rozwał wiatr. Połóżcie, mówię wam, swoje ręce na niej i powiedzcie, darujemy ci tę pierzynę. Po co nam ona? Już nie ma w niej pierza, tylko ból. Uleczcie nasze rany, a uleczycie swoje. I będziemy znowu razem. To apel, ale nie apel poległy. To apel dla życia. Chcemy, aby do Polski wróciło 3 miliony Żydów i abyście znowu byli z nami, zamieszkali. Potrzebujemy was. Prosimy, wróćcie. Kiedy was zabrakło, cieszyliśmy się z tym. Powtarzaliśmy, nareszcie jesteśmy sami we własnym domu. Polski Polak w Polsce, któremu nareszcie nikt nie przeszkadza. A ponieważ ciągle nie byliśmy szczęśliwi, czasem udawało nam się znaleźć jeszcze jakiegoś Żyda i wyprosić go z naszego kraju. Nawet jak już wiadomo było, że nikogo z was nie ma, ciągle byli tacy, którzy was wyrzucali i wyrzucali. I co? Dziś ze znudzeniem patrzymy na nasze podobne do siebie twarze. Na ulicach wielkich miast wypatrujemy obcych i wsłuchujemy się w ich mowę. Tak! Dziś już wiemy, że nie możemy żyć sami. Potrzebujemy innego, a nie ma innego bliższego nam niż wy. Przybywajcie, ci sami, lecz odmienieni. Zamieszkajmy razem.
So it goes on for the it's about 10 minutes of film.
You wrote the text or you wrote?
So yeah, I invited Slavomir to become the protagonist of the project, and I asked him also to write the text. So he wrote the text together with Kinga Dune, and she's his friend and intellectual, also part of the Kritika Polityczna and feminist, and so they wrote the text together, but he performed it. And it was very, very important for this film that it comes from his voice, or what it actually means for him to be part of such project. So it wouldn't work if there was an actor actually playing his role, because I mean this is exactly the kind of my interest is in the fiction and the reality, and he playing basically himself but as a character. There is a quite nice anecdote about this performance, because normally he performs in public TV, but he had to perform in front of the camera in empty stadium, and he couldn't deliver. So we had to stop the production and ask for someone to bring vodka. Of course, the cliche of Polish people. He drank about half of a bottle, and then he delivered it very quickly, and he remembered everything. It was very easy to work with him at that point. But vodka was necessary. The film was screened both in Poland and Israel, and received a lot of very interesting, very diverse reaction. You can imagine in Israel it was, of course, it was welcomed by the Israeli leftist community, and understood it as kind of intellectual, triggering for discussion. But when I had I showed the work in different occasions, and of course for the more, let's say, right-wing people, it was a horrible film that I basically sent Jews back to the chamber, to the gas chambers, how I dared, and it was a very harsh reactions towards this provocation. And I think for me it was a very interesting discussion, because it really, I mean, it was I was invited to the kind of a program, like a news. It's like two journalists interviewed me in their program and asked me a lot of questions. So what does it mean about Palestinians? Do you offer a return of Palestinians? So it brought the question of the right of return, and so it really hit the point of this project. So the kind of mirroring what it means to do such a project, how that mirrors into Israel and the Middle East. And so the kind of beginning of this discourse, it really encouraged me to continue and think of to actually continue the project. So at that point I decided it should be a trilogy. I should continue and to go deeper into the story. Also my invented story. And so
does the stadiums always represent to me massacres that occurred during wartime, like in Santiago, for example? What is the story of this?
So yeah, this is it's called the 10th anniversary stadium to celebrate the 10 years for the Communist Party, built in 1955 in Warsaw from the rebel of the city after the war. I chose this space, I mean, because of historically the Olympic Stadium was meant only for the Aryans, for the Germans, and the Jews were in the camp. So I wanted to also use this architecture to say, okay, come back. And of course the empty stadium represents a void of the non-existing Jewish community. That's also the kind of, for me, it always reminds me of Shoah, the very, very first shots when he goes to camp, and actually you don't see anything, you just see the grass. And so it reminded me that kind of relations. It's so strong that the empty stadium resonates so much of the ghost, of also the fear from the ghost of history. And so this stadium does not exist anymore. After we shot the film in 2007, they closed the stadium and turned it into it's now the massive Olympic stadium for football. Also on the top you see that it was the market run by the Vietnamese community, so the largest non-Polish, so largest minority, I would say, of the Vietnamese flea market, and that's a historical picture celebrating the Communist Party celebration. And Richard Shivich, I think it's also interesting. He burned himself as an act of resistance in the stadium. Yeah. So I thought it's also interesting. decision to actually shoot the film there. And of course, it's resemble trying to be Leni. We call it Leni Riefenstahl style. So like being then trying to learn a bit of Leni Riefenstahl way of making films. She was, often doing the lower angles. She used always very, very big cameras, so they had to actually dig into the earth in order to make those lower angles. But today with technology, it's not necessary. So yeah, this guy, just like from the production. So after Marek Ushma, 2 years later, so 2009, I really tried to think who is he calling? Like, who are the Jews that he's asking to return? And so I created this. This is, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but this is how Israel performed its power. It's F-15 above the Auschwitz. This is how Israel, perform its performativity. But it's not how we return. So that's actually, those images are very much used for kids coming to Poland. But I imagine a more kind of maybe romantic way of coming back. It's going back to, again, early Zionism, pioneers in Palestine, going back to actually the origins. So they all come, a lot of them come from Poland. Again, using very similar aesthetics, and then I created this fictional movement, the Jewish Renaissance movement. It's from the emblem of the Polish national symbol and the Star of David. So because I wanted to create a sort of the feeling that we are now a community that actually return. And then also I refer to the Wall and Tower. These were between 36 to 39, those kibbutzim, like communities that were built in Palestine. And so this is the spread of how many, and so they go to we established the same forum in the Warsaw Ghetto. Again, this is the location of where we shot. It's next to the monument of the ghetto heroes. So very, very charged location, the former ghetto. Actually not allowed to dig there because there are still bones from after the war. But we worked with the Jewish, what will be the Polish, the Museum for the History of the Polish Jews. So we got a permission from them to shoot there. So this is a kind of Photoshop how I'm going to build my own kibbutz in the ghetto. So I will show a clip. From Wall and Tower, more in Wieża. You know him. It's a quite famous Polish artist, Willem Sasnal.
Jezus
show a few clips because, for example, that shot, I will soon show you why I'm choosing this. And also another clip. So what you heard, I mean, the soundtrack, this is the Israeli anthem played backwards. So it's a different way to basically do the reverse and kind of flipping symbols upside down and see what it means. And also this kind of construction in the context of Poland, of course, resemble a concentration camp, right? So it's like raises a lot of question of what actually we are doing here. And then I kept for another day this crazy kibbutz and let people just pass by and without saying much. Murano is actually the name of the neighborhood, so that's why kibbutz Murano. Nobody actually dared to enter. And we interviewed people during the production. So it was a 3 days production. Quite fast, and asked people what they think of this idea of the return of Jews, and there were quite interesting conversations. Some really hated the idea because Jews will take over the property and their, and some Israeli woman who was there, she was very happy. She said we should keep it forever, and this kind of construction, it should be a monument of, so anyway, it was quite interesting to see that on one hand this fiction of building a kibbutz, but also on the other hand what I really liked, it was there was a real sense of community. So, and I invited a lot of my friends from Israel to come and visit for the first time Poland and come and get to know Polish people, and something quite interesting happened in sort of sharing a moment together. So after the first and second part, we decided with Sebastian Ciechocki to actually apply to represent Poland in Venice Biennial. And it was just about the time that I was thinking to make the third part, not sure what should be how it should be and what it should be, and so we applied with the first two films, and we said we are planning to make the third. It was Sebastian and Galit Elat again applying, and we very quickly received a yes. This project is going to represent Poland. So it was, for me, it was really creating a new reality for the project, because this fiction became so real. And so how should I deal with that reality? The Polish Minister of Culture is receiving this idea and make it so welcomed. I was also quite suspicious about it, but I thought this would be an interesting moment for the project also to include the different voices, different reactions to the project. So the film would become a platform for supporting this idea or against the idea, so it becomes more active. And it's not about me anymore, it's not about my ideas, but actually what people think of my idea. So I invited, I actually really wanted the Minister of Culture to perform, but he, of course, diplomatically said no. And then one of the first ideas was actually I wanted to, thinking of leaders and thinking of progressive leaders, often they end up being assassinated. So it was clearly for me that I would like to make the film around assassination of the leader, but also to get rid of my character, to see what happens to the movement, to the idea, in storytelling and literature, and not really indicating what and whom and how he was killed, but just to make it as a fact. And then the film, was again the kind of saying goodbye to the leader, but also allowing different voices to be part of the project. And this is me being quite embarrassed in the Minister of Culture in Warsaw, getting the certificate that I will represent Poland. So I was the first the non-Polish artist to represent Poland, but it was not in the context, of course, of a nation's pavilions. It was interesting for me. It was not the first time. It already happened in other pavilions. So I think I should. I'll show a clip because it's a 40 minutes film altogether. So just a clip to get the sense of the aesthetics and some of the voices. But quite important, we already, oops, that's this is taken during the production of the I don't see anything. Yeah, so we already had quite a visual for the movement. And so we also wrote the Manifesto of the movement, translated to different languages, and distributed. And one of the things that was really important for me at this point was also to continue the idea of collaboration and fiction and the non. And so I worked with the actress Susanna Sachse from Berlin. She's Rivka. Rivka is mentioned in the first part. He's talking about Rivka. So becomes the ghost of return. And also the story is based on Gabriel Narutovich. He was assassinated at the Zachęta Museum. He was again progressive Polish leader who included actually Jewish politicians, and he was assassinated for that. He was assassinated by an artist in the gallery. So that's his memorial, or lead the parade. And then Yitzhak Rabin, which, one of the reasons for me to leave Israel also related to the assassination of Rabin and like the kind of hopeless feeling for better future. And so I linked his also some texts or the kind of eulogies read for him in his funeral were somehow incorporated in the film. So the one who are familiar with the eulogies, you can recognize it, but it's not a must. But a lot of references from the reality comes coming into the last part. And Alona Frankel, she's one of the speakers in the film, and then Anda Rothenberg, controversial curator from Warsaw, and Yaron London, representing Zionism. And he was the guy who invited me to his program and kind of... But he is quite right-wing, but more maybe center, but actually he understood. He's a very smart guy. He understood what I'm trying to do with the project. So he agreed to join in. He's a very good actor. And he wrote himself the text. So, I don't know, it's 8 o'clock, so how much you want to see? Huh?
Show us as much as you want. We want to see more.
Okay, so I will, also one thing to understand, it really the way everything was produced, the movement grows, so also the film become bigger and more, including more and more people. So it goes on, and then
I am Rivka, who was murdered and buried anew, who was disinherited, who was moved, breathless, from the mass graves of Auschwitz, Babij Yar, Treblinka, Majdanek, Sobibor, to the Shrine of Memory, to the Mausoleum of Architecture of the Sublime in Jerusalem.
I can be found everywhere.
I can be found everywhere,
In Stockholm,
and the ghost of return,
in Buenos Aires,
the return,
in Beverly Hills,
returning to herself. Sunken in the crypt of grief that cannot be expressed in words, my dead tongue hides something that was buried alive. I'm here to reveal the destruction of the understood through the tongue. I'm here to weave the torture of identity from the threads of forgetfulness. I am condemned to exist in a frozen crystal, saved from healing,
des Trauerns,
removed from the
die
present.
sich schwer in Worte fassen lässt, bin ich dazu verdammt, alles wieder neu zu erleben. Ich bin verdammt, mit meiner Zunge etwas zu enthüllen, was lebendig begraben wurde. Ich bin da, um die Verständlichkeit der Vernichtung mit meiner Zunge zu enthüllen. Ich bin da, um aus den Fäden des Vergessens das Folterkleid der Identität zu legen.
So I'm gonna jump to, this is the wife, the fictional wife. I'm just thinking what makes sense. I think quite interesting to listen to Alona Frenkel.
Polacy, rodacy, ludzie. Nazywam się Alona Frenkel. Jestem Żydówką. Pozostanę Żydówką, póki żyje ostatni antysemita. Uważam antysemityzm za odrażającą chorobę, coś tak jak nekrofilia. Moim rodzinnym krajem jest Polska. Urodziłam się 27 czerwca roku 1937 w Krakowie. Niemiecka okupacja ogrobiła mnie z dzieciństwa. Ucieczka, strach śmiertelny, getto, głód, prześladowania, akcje, aryjskie papiery, sierocińcy. A po wyzwoleniu parę przepięknych lat w moim ukochanym Krakowie. Niestety, antysemickie szykany zmusiły moich rodziców i mnie do opuszczenia tego kraju, Polski. Moje obywatelstwo zostało mi odebrane. Byłam wtedy 12-letnią dziewczynką. Jedynym krajem gotowym nas przygarnąć był Izrael. Stoję dziś przed wami na mojej rodzinnej ziemi, na ziemi moich przodków od setek lat. Domagam się, zwróćcie mi moje przemocą odebrane obywatelstwo. Nie zamieszkam między wami. Moim krajem jest Izrael i nie pragnę mieszkać w żadnym innym miejscu na świecie. Ale zwrócenie mi mojego przemocą odebranego obywatelstwa będzie aktem historycznej sprawiedliwości, który jest mi potrzebny i żywię głęboką nadzieję, że jest potrzebny również Wam. Żegnam Was. Shalom.
So when I invited Alona Frenkel, I told her it's free. You can write your own speech. You can talk about whatever is important for you to deliver in this context. And she was talking about historical justice. That was for her the most important element to actually. So her very personal history, talking about something larger. I mean, there's the very this kind of voice from Israeli guy talking about this stupid act of the Polish naive guy asking Jews to return, and of course he's like, "There's no way we're going to return," and then comes the also the members of the movement.
Your heritage, which combines Judaism and universality, commands us to have everlasting faith. Poles and Jews together, we shall advance, shoulder to shoulder, in the name of the noble idea of coexistence. Together, we shall prevent the surges of nationalism and racism from flooding Europe.
This is the response we propose for this time of crisis, when faith has been exhausted and old utopias have failed. Optimism is dying out. The promised paradise has been privatized. The
the kibbutz apples and watermelons are no longer as ripe.
We direct our appeal not only to Jews, we accept into our ranks all those for whom there is no place in their homeland, the expelled and persecuted. There will be no discrimination in our movement. We shall not ask for your life stories. We shall not check the residence cards or question your refugee status. We shall be strong in our weakness.
With one religion, we cannot listen.
With one color, we cannot see.
With one culture, we cannot feel.
Without you, we cannot even remember.
Join us, and Europe will be stunned.
So this is part of the manifesto, and they recite also some parts of Slavomir text from the first film, trying to connect everything. Then there was a song written for a goodbye song for the leader, and so it became this crazy thing. But I can leave, of course, the films for you to watch another time. Again, references for the visual to the aesthetics. Smolensk, that happened the same time when we worked on the film. You know, the crash in Russia. So we actually chose the same square, which was also called the Hitler Square at the time of the occupation. That all were national commemoration, and so it's quite a central, and next to the Genta Museum. So the location made a lot of sense for this fiction. Also references from Solidarity movement and from the Bund, an anti-Zionist Jewish labor movement. And then some images from the Polish pavilion. And Europe will be stunned. So it's about 20 meter long, 20 by 8, and we decided to show the 3 films in a kind of way that is non-linear, so you actually can choose where to go, right or left, as well as using glass as for actually you can see through the walls. So it becomes a kind of mirroring each other and creating a very democratic path through the exhibition. Sort of a kaleidoscope, I would say, that you very much, the 3 films, like it's 5 years of work or 6 years, and then emerge to one installation. So, and also in terms of the soundtrack, you could hear, watching the first film, you can already hear the last film, and also watching the last film, you can hear his voice. So it's a kind of a loop situation, and then distributing the posters. And we invited the participants to take part in a cookbook for political imagination. Artists, scholars, activists contributed a recipe for political imagination. So volunteer, do it yourself, and a real recipe for food. And this is like, these are recent pictures from the same site where we shot Wall and Tower, and now it's the museum, designed by a Finnish architect. It's actually
the same place?
Same exact place.
Oh.
Yeah. Same exact, that's what I said in the beginning, that we worked with a to-be Jewish museum. Goes back 7 centuries. It's like very, very long history of Jewish community in Poland. Yeah. So in the exhibition, where I show the trilogy, I often display also visual references, because to help the viewers who are not familiar with the history to understand my kind of decisions. And then during the first, actually in the pavilion, we actually started a movement. So actually you can get a membership, you become part of the movement as a member. And we announced the first Congress of the Jewish Renaissance Movement in Poland to be in Berlin. It was part of the Berlin Biennale in 2012, the one that Artur Żmijewski created. So he invited us to, for 3 days discussions, very hot debates in the Hebel am Ufer. It's a theater that we actually removed all the chairs and created one platform as the stage for the table. So people registering to... and again, here is again another opportunity for people to raise their voice and contribute to the project and expand the discussion. And on the right side is the first Zionist Congress in Basel, where they declared also the State of Israel. And so we go again, a very direct dialogue with the fathers, I would say. I will show a clip from the Congress because it's like about 2 hours documentation from the 3 days. Each day was dedicated to another question. First day was about Europe, how Europe has to change in order to welcome the other. And we invited basically delegates to propose an idea, what has to change. And that turned into the agenda of the movement. So whatever was selected by the committee became part of the agenda. The second day was about Poland. So actually the consequences of a return of 3.3 million Jews, how Poland has to be prepared for the change. And then what will happen to Israel? How can Israel change to become part of the Middle East?
How did you choose the delegates?
These are some drawings from the Congress. It was an open call on the website and distributed through the biennial. But also I contact people that I felt that they have something to contribute to the project. But also ask them, can you recommend on someone? And so those somehow like your process of inviting people. And later on, this became, after doing the Congress, I showed the work in Secession in Vienna, and that created another reality, including more ideas to the project. And so Theodor Herzl, the founder of Zionism, is from Vienna, and he lived in the same street as Freud for many years, but they never met. So I thought this is an opportunity for them to meet. So So they became the kind of spiritual father of the movement. But actually Freud never was interested in his Jewish history, and he never wanted to, he was busy with his studies. And then again, inviting people and discussing and so forth. And I worked with the Freud Museum. We created 3 altars for the movement, for Herzl and for Freud. And then a massive chart of actually explaining why they are our fathers. It's you cannot really read it, but it goes into the history of each of them, their biographies, and connecting and like some ideas. It was like a large print. And then I turned into this. Yeah. This is the result of working too much on that. Yeah, so I thought this is like the right age to try to be, to go into the skin of a man and become Herzl myself. This is quite interesting. This beard is actually called a Herzl beard. You can actually rent it.
Oh, really?
So I tried to, copy his gesture. Yes, so this is male me, the man me, or whatever you call it. I mean, yeah, you can see it, like, on the right side, that's it. Not bad, huh? Convincing. I always want to go out with but I think it's too strange. Yes. I always like to show Rim's proposal from the third day because she's just hitting the spot for me, in this context. So I will show you Rim Fada's proposal.
I would like to ask that we acknowledge the right of return to both Jewish and non-Jewish people. There needs to be addressed a historical violence that was perpetrated on a native people in Palestine through the insertion of a colonialist entity and a building of a nation and suppressing the rights of one people in favor of the other, with a large supremacist understanding that white, predominantly white, let's say European model of a colonial building of a nation started in a place that they are more deserving of it. And yes, it is colonial, and I evoke colonial in a very precise way, because it was based on the idea that I materially deserve to take your house and your land through war and through the perpetuation of violence, and I deserve to kick you out. And I'm there, and then I can also build a myth to say that I took a land with no people, forgetting the exodus of hundreds of thousands of people. So before we acknowledge the right that the state of Israel, or whatever the history of that place was founded on a violent undertaking, we will never be able to absolve what that history has, what the demarcations of that occurrence actually made for the entire region. And what did it make for the entire region? When you think of hundreds of thousands of people leaving their houses, their material goods, please look at it as material goods. We're talking about Haifa, Jaffa, beautiful cities, with intelligentsia, with intellectuals. This is not the loss of 400 villages. I don't care about the villages. Sorry. We lost our cities. So basically, what we are trying to reclaim here is the historical right by saying the right of return. Yes, people in Israel, people who have perpetuated this history, the legacy of their children will understand what they have done. Like we understand how the Jewish people, when they returned to Poland, what was perpetuated against them.
Our proposal is called De-Ashkenizing Zionism.
You want to hear that? It was very controversial.
For a sustainable Jewish future in the Middle East. It's a well-known fact that Israel's very foundation was premised on the denial of the Orient, both in terms of delegitimizing the rights of Palestinian people and depriving Oriental Jews of rights and resources and keeping them away from positions of power. Israel's rejection of the Middle East is as both a domestic and regional affair. For by imagining Israel as a European territory, it blocks itself from the region and prevents Mizrahi Jews from ever becoming worthy national subjects. The Israeli left, which is predominantly Ashkenazi, is not really seen as the prime agent for peace and assimilation, but is in fact the left which is building on this European imagination and aesthetics in every aspect of its struggle. It was the left that initiated the logic of segregation, with the separation wall being its most recent and brutal manifestation, Its discourse is humanistic and secular and deems every opposing discourse as a reincarnation of all European discourses, and now we can see fascism, Nazism, and McCarthyism are frequent points of reference. It collaborates with and gets funded by the European nation, and it still holds a key position with the academy, the media, the cultural elite, in all of which Mizrahi representation is ridiculously low.
Sami Shalom Shitrit, who is a Mizrahi activist and a politician and thinker, saying that he's very much appreciative of this beautiful work that the lefty NGOs are doing, but I'm quoting, but it's not enough, and it's not the essence, and it will never be the essence. There is no way to go around it. We have to say it in the clearest possible way. Only when the European Ashkenazi Jews will start to pack their bags and leave the country, I will start to appreciate their actions against their ancestors' colonialism. I think that's the highest level of awareness imaginable. If you want to shorten the reign of Zionistic Ashkenazi colonialism, collect the children and collect your enlightening books and go to Europe or America. Only when some Ashkenazi left-wing organization will encourage and finance the departure of Israelis, then I will know that something is really happening in the Israeli left. I'm talking about encouraging all the Israelis to get up and move. But like we know, the Mizrahi Oriental Jews are not aware enough to their contribution to white colonialism, and they don't have European passports. And therefore, they will probably won't go anywhere and will be forced to look the Arabs in the eye and find a better way of living in this country.
It is very nice, and to talk about Jewish Renaissance in Poland and Germany when there are almost no Jews. And I think we have to take this into account and be serious about that. So it's a beautiful suggestion, but so this is connected to the other issue. So I'm not for expelling Ashkenazi Jews from Israel to Europe. I want them with me and the Middle East and Israel. And now, as to the issue of the law of return. Yeah, there is the right to law of return. I mean, there is a large animosity. Now, of course, maybe I am a bit confined here. I'm talking because I'm a member of the Geneva Initiative, and whereby we have articulated with our Palestinian partners a sort of a formula of addressing this issue without sort of answering, I guess, Reem's how to put it, maximalist demand that would be open. And I think that today it is an unstarted position. You talk about the right of return, and it is like you antagonize all the Jewish population of Israel. It would not be a starter for any peace negotiation between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. So therefore, I think, in this respect, I would vote no, because I think we are not being practical here, and that, if anything, we're going to block any possibility of talking, sincerely, with the very majority of Jewish Israel. So I don't think it's a good starter.
Fuck the Geneva Convention. It's not going to, as you can tell. And by the way, that's why it screws us over and over again. And that's why the Oslo peace process will go nowhere. And that's why all of this will go nowhere, because the Oslo peace process happens with no acknowledgement of right of return, which means no acknowledgement for the historical violence perpetuated by Israel and by its people and its supremacist kind of thinking. Therefore, the amount of settlement building in the West Bank increases in a matter of only 2 years, exponentially more ever during the Oslo peace process because of that. Because there's still this feeling, I'm entitled to take your fucking land. So no, I'm sorry. Address the core issue first. Right of return for the Palestinians, what it means historically. What happened? What have you done and what you should stop doing? Because it happens today. I mean, today you find, I'm positive, I can bet my life on it, that today there was an incident. I didn't see the newspaper, but there should be an incident where a settler decides to take a plot of land in the West Bank. Sorry, so my historical reminder is because it happened today in the future, today in the present and in the future. And this attitude of Israel, it should fucking stop.
I know a bit about politics and how it works. Politicians, when they sit together, They don't agree on the right of anything unless they know what the other is going to give them in advance. It just doesn't work like that, you know? That because there is a situation whereby there is a zero-sum game, each other know each other's throat, and they say, well, even though I recognize this right, nothing guarantees me that the ramification and implication will be such and such. So usually when politicians sit there, they said, okay, you know, I would consider it, knowing that that would be the ramifications, implications of that would be sort of limited and narrowed and this and that way. Most of the Palestinians who would enjoy the right of return would go to the West Bank and not to Tel Aviv and Haifa. So there are a lot of arrangements, you know. I think this is how it works in reality. So just to come and to demand of Israel to do that, you know, it would be sort of the usual Israeli politicians said, fuck no, using your verb.
Do you want to come quickly back on that?
One thing, I'm doing an Obama move here. Really, I mean, only 2 days ago, or 3 days ago, he came out and he says, I'm for gay marriage and gay union rights. He knows that he's not, this is a state law. You know, this is according to state law. But what he knows that he did is he's saying, I'm with the right. And the right changes mindsets of people that will make laws and acknowledge things that will make a difference in their society. And he stood in the right position of history. I'm doing a politician's move by saying the right.
He already checked very well the implication, the ballot of his statement.
Me too.
No. And also, I think I have to say something, Yossi, which is that politics is the art of the possible until the impossible becomes possible. So you never can think that the impossible will ever become possible. You can never think. And we're here to think, not to be pragmatic, because pragmatism has got us nowhere in the last 20 years. Sorry, but I think it's important.
Will the movement take into account that by realizing its goals, it will question the existence of the State of Israel? I mean, what will happen to Israel if 3.3 million Jews will leave the country? What kind of Israel will be then possible? Will Israel disappear or not? But my question to the movement is only if the movement regarding the principles of Slavomir Zizekowski, who was assassinated, one should not forget that, would take into account the disappearance of Israel.
The moment Israel is existing...
Okay, it's blah, 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 blah.
You've shown this as a video after the event? I mean, do you show it? Is it like exhibition format?
Yeah, it was shown in the secession. That was shown. And some screenings and... Whoever is interested is showing it because it's not an artwork as you know, it's a more, you know, a lot of talking, but you know.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Can we have some light and some questions, maybe?
To Herzl, maybe. Huh?
Yeah.
Ask him. I can answer, maybe.
Okay.
So one of the ideas in the secession was to ask him questions. I wanted to do a seance with him, but it's complicated to make a seance. I did a lot of research to do a seance with him and Freud, and anyway, because I have a lot of questions for him.
To go to a medium, I mean, this...
The seance, like medium, like...
So any question there? Yes.
I would like to know if this has been shown also in Israel.
This, yes, it was shown.
And how was the...
It was actually, it was shown in the Tel Aviv Museum, and they actually bought the trilogy, so it's in their collection. As I said before, it was like very... It really depends on the kind of... you know, where are you seated in terms of politically? Where are you, and where is you situated, or in your ability to actually see it as a kind of what such a project can trigger, and so quite a diverse, a lot of very, very negative reactions, a lot of me being anti-Zionist, being anti-Semite, a lot of cursing, a lot of very heavy words, but it doesn't matter for me so much, as long as it's actually going to schools, and I went with that work also to in the context, like communities that are not supporting my visions. So, but for me it was a tool to discuss, a tool to open, to really contemplate on the reality and see if we can find a way out. What does it really mean? And of course, it also at the same time it's very symbolic work and
ironic somehow.
Yeah, but it can be read as a very ironic piece of work. But we really, we were very sincere and took it very serious every step of the project. A lot of people were, hearing the speech and thinking this is an irony. It doesn't, But what does it do, irony, for the reality, Yeah.
But talking about irony, I think it's very, very interesting how things are put together. Because of course, I just said in the beginning, often your work starts from this idea of how the narrative is manipulated. How the power is building a fictional reality, and is showing it to you, and how you problematize that through offering another perspective. So you are like shifting in another direction. But then it seems that you use the same strategy, through using this propaganda aesthetic, through declaring the fictional aspect in the process of what you do, which is at the same time the fact that you are an artist, so the fiction is included itself in the art making process. In the process of making art. But somehow you underline this kind of a little bit of distance from this total participation in the process. So there is at the same time, I think, a cooperation between the belief of you in what you are building, but at the same time, a kind of, okay, but this maybe it could be also a propaganda thing. So I wanted to ask you about, how you see yourself in this position,
I think, of course, it's very, using a propaganda aesthetics is very seductive and also manipulative, and I think my acknowledgement of me looking at those historical films, knowing that I'm being manipulated because I'm an active viewer, I wanted, first of all, it's a method for me to activate the viewers, that they have to find themselves within the work, to find their position. So I'm not giving it's not a story that I did with an agenda that per se, this is what I think, and now you have to believe in my narrative and my vision. And I want my viewer to be active. I want them to reflect on, understand, and to also understand that they are trapped in the nations in a kind of, because I believe that we're still kind of trapped in the nation's story, and therefore I'm choosing an aesthetic that is the kind of like every decision here is taken seriously, and to actually show that we are still kind of stuck in it, in the kind of not me, but maybe me still, but as a society, as a kind of it's still very powerful. People die for the country. People still, go to war and die for the country. Die to the. We still, this kind of 19th century idea of nation states and coming up with a myth and telling a story why we people belong to certain territory and all that. It's still so present. We were running a lot of workshops around national identity before the Congress, just to see together the sense of what it means for people, and it was quite interesting to see that there is not really an alternative, but I think one of the things that I am interested in utopia, but I'm also quite conscious that utopia has failed us, and so the dystopia and utopia for me always work together. So I guess also Mike also assassinating the leader is like also like the kind of his utopian vision, and we have to be also aware of that. So I guess it's a back and forth, in terms of my relation to the story I'm telling. We have always to be conscious about, and it's also for the fact that I'm not. I don't have a solution. It's not that I have. I'm not systematic in that sense that for me, I do the work to understand and to think, and to invite people to participate in the act of thinking and feelings. Or I read a lot of Hannah Arendt, and she's like her way of writing and her way of thinking. I feel very close to. So I think it's also the idea of also problematizing the act itself. For me, it's a very productive way to involve the audience, and I don't know if it makes sense.
No, of course.
It's also to use very seductive imagery that belongs to very kind of, right-wing, often right-wing ideology. And so if we...
Communist, communist, we were growing up in this country and this was the aesthetic.
Yeah, socialist, Bolshevik, all this, they share the same aesthetics. But it's all about utopia, creating a new society, a better society, but, which,
Is there a link between this reversed Hatikva, this, let's say, Marxist iconography with this kind of pioneers, and also with the concept of the death of God, also for Israel itself. So Israel as a state and not as a spiritual entity or foundation of a civilization, Judeo-Christian civilization, European Judeo-Christian civilization. Is there a link between these
there is.
Because when we listen to this Hatikva reversed, which is very, very impressive, and see this movement and the gestures and everything like this, it put together this kind of utopian and dystopian at the same time entity, which is very powerful and indicates maybe let's say a kind of another era, a new era, a new age. No.
I don't know if I indicate any new age, but I know that for me something ended radically in my experience, and then I want to. I mean, it's one of the things that his wife mentioned is like that he was shot during an exhibition about the chosen people. So this whole idea of the chosen and the redemption and the Messiah. So like something that people keeps on holding into and trying to find some sort of hope. so he can be like, I know in Poland they refer to him as a sort of is a messianic project. Yeah. Also going back to Poland to Jakob Frank, you know, and also Bruno Schulz and all the spiritual, a lot of activities around messianic also in Poland, and I had to somehow get rid of everything. That was my wish. I don't know if I propose anything new, but at least I had to.
And aesthetically speaking, is it intentional, this, let's say, this reappropriation or reintroduction of allegory? Also within the symbols, this symbol of David star and Polish eagle and so on. Is it the result of a research, of a new research, so to speak out with the kind of allegory, new allegory?
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of representing the coexistence possibility, but of course...
But in terms of aesthetic, is it a research for expressing toward the allegory? Or not? Or it is just like this, it came out like this?
It's just made a lot of sense, more than anything, to take two nations and see what happens in this kind of... I mean, I had a lot of thought around reconciliation. Is there a way to reconcile with the past? Is there a way to overcome the trauma? Is there a way... It's like thinking of the prime sin. It's like thinking of often that you have to go to the prime sin in order to get rid of that person. You know, like a lot of women who went through rape, they have to go because it's an act of getting rid of some. So for me, that was the act. We go back in order to start again, or like a lot of that line of thinking, quite psychological, but
it's very powerful indeed. That's why it is not just, let's say, something that represents the real, nor the past, and know the future, because we don't know. So it's something very allegorical. It's just like kind of indeterminate entity which represents, in fact, this profound reality that touches the subject. So that is in the center of the subject, which is tricky. So that's why I'm asking if it is a kind of research for building up this image, or it came out, let's say, just like this.
No, but this is not just like this project. Okay. This is a project that every step, every decision taken here. Also, I took the time 2 years between each film, incorporating sort of the reality of that time, and trying to really be sensitive to the reactions and. But I wanted to say something, but I forgot. I wanted to quite interesting, like when it was represented in Poland. So our Minister of Culture from Israel, who, you know, she heard about this project and she said she visited all the pavilions. And she said, I'm not going to the Polish pavilion because there is this anti-Zionist artist from Israel, and she's doing this project, and it was quite interesting. And then suddenly I started to receive phone calls, and like from the media in Israel, and they wanted to cover my reaction, what I think, and then they called her. I mean, not her directly, but someone who was in charge of her, and they said, you have to go. I mean, this is controversial. You cannot not visit the Polish pavilion, and blah, blah, blah. So she went. She eventually went, and then I met her afterwards, very briefly, and she was very, very happy that the leader died, and it's not going to happen. So that's what I mean when fiction becomes reality. So this kind of... She really considered it as a real project, as an anti-Zionist project, but luckily it's not going to happen. And then...
So we got rid of the leader.
And also I heard another guy, because for me it's actually very, very interesting. There's one guy who said, this is the best documentary I've ever seen. Yes, after seeing the trilogy. So from then on, I think that what I do is documenting fictional reality, because there is the feeling also that it's a little bit documentary style. Anyway, so it's a good anecdote to.
Thank you again.
Thank you.